planning, you know, bombs to detonate the building. And then a couple weeks later, all these planes go crashing into it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm a pilot, okay, and I know damn well that I would probably getting in the controls of a 747, and first of all, I would have a heart attack trying to figure out how, and to make that kind of maneuver, I couldn't make it in a Cessna, you know, and yet these guys, I mean, yeah, yeah. So it's an amazing. It really is an amazing thing. We live. I mean, first of all, they talk about this Maya or this illusion, and there is that whole thing. And of course, the other thread is, that we're all living under a computer civilization, which is just staggering. And if in fact that is the case, then you could look at this one big universe as Tron. Something of a Tron, where literally, and in fact, the various vehicles would be UFOs or whatever, messengers, to actually kind of orchestrate a lot of this stuff. So.
Yeah, we begin, maybe we are a simulation in a computer, maybe we're nothing like, again, I talk about like the Twilight Zone and all those old shows. There was a show and a series where the aliens came down and took a city, a small little city, town, and transported it to their planet and gave it to his kid. And his kid was, we were just playthings and assimilation for that kid. So we could be all on a computer chip, but I don't know. I kind of lean more towards that we're being visited by aliens and they're trying to check us out and see if we're a threat. I think there's some of them out there are trying to help us and steer us the right direction. And then I think there's some of them. I was talking to a guest here a week ago that said that, she had information that, the government was working with aliens and abducting kids and adults and stuff for experiments. So,
well, again, if you get, the fact of strangers in fiction during World War II, part of a lot of the Nazis wanted to use, California. There's actually there were medical experiments being done in California, and forced sterilizations and things like that. And there also was going on in Virginia. And so they wanted to bring this stuff up, I guess in defense of their own, it's really ridiculous, horrible things. But the Nuremberg judges wouldn't allow it in. And even though, what's so funny is that we're dealing with this and of this ridiculous double standard, as far as that. Again, the space program, we brought all the Nazi scientists and, von Braun and all those people. That's what made our space program move forward.
Oh, yeah.
So they're, but we're all being, there is this whole, school of and I don't want to get too carried away. I just, with the fear end of this, because my contention is that they would have already done it. They would have actually, conquered if they weren't prevented from.
Yeah.
And so, but we live in this world of, how things are conducted. Like, for instance, fake news. I mean, now everybody believes everything that's out there is fake news. And it's all about controlling the narrative. And that's the most important thing in the whole world about what governments do, and even about with the whole, UFO and space contactee movement, et cetera, et cetera. There has been a fierce battle over controlling the narrative. And in reality, seems to be a whole spy versus spy. And I saw this with my uncle and the conversation I had with him. He died in '78, and it was a war zone of people, and they didn't know who was in the intelligence end or who was bought off. And we're seeing a lot of the same things here. I'm seeing some of the stuff, where they almost, with what they're saying, almost trying to create this military conflict, trying to actually create budgets. This guy, Blink 182 guy, that just recently came out, and he filled his company up with a bunch of CIA people about, extraterrestrials and all that work and what have you. But their contention is that aliens are in fact evil, and that we're going to see this gigantic conflict. Well, part of the motivation that I could really see for them to come out and say that is a military budget, because that's all under the military budget thing. And if you've always got to have a potential threat in order to get a budget, as far as that, it's kind of one of those things.
And going even back to, like you mentioned, like the fake news, it's sure strange. It's only been in like the last year they talk about the fake news, and they do that because I hate to say it's like propaganda. Like in Nazi Germany, they were probably the best experts in propaganda with their people, and it seems like that's what they want you to do. They don't want you to believe anything you read or hear, and that's what's got me scared, because if there is something happening, they don't, I mean, let's face it, everything's fake news. So they can come back and debunk it and say, hey, it's just fake news because of what the president's done or what's going on in the world today. So, I mean, it's just, it just makes me wonder, something out there is going on. I know that too many things has happened. Like, look at what happened 20 years ago over in the UK, over the Air Force Base, where a lot of the military and military police saw a UFO. And then you have the reports of like people in the missile silos. All of a sudden, the missile starts to activate, and right over above them is a reported UFO. I don't know. It's just, if we are being watched, and if there are aliens out there, I don't know what they want from us. I mean, you have different species. It's like you have different countries, and everybody thinks different. So, I mean, you might have one species out there, it wants to help you and me. And then there's another one that wants to look at us like, hey, we want to dissect you like you're a bug. And then you have another one that, like I said earlier, wants to eat you. I mean, you never know. And it's just, if anybody says there's not UFOs and these things aren't going, I mean, it's been, I don't know. And it's funny, anybody who has really spoke up, and said, hey, I worked like at Area 51, and they started talking about it, all of a sudden, their whole credibility is really destroyed really fast by the government. I mean, to look like they're a flaming nut. Or the other thing happens, they have a heart attack while they're driving their car, or they have their car flips over and they're dead. It's so strange, and I don't think the government wants to know, or us to know, what is going on, and I think something is going on about the fake news. 2 years ago, you didn't hear about fake news. Now it's all fake news. So nobody knows what is true and what's not true, and that's what I think they want you to do. They want you to believe that everything you read is not real.
No, and that's, again, they are controlling the narrative, as far as that, and it's really it's really shameful when you think about it, because as far as I mean, number one, if you go on a more mundane level, if you're a taxpayer, you're paying for all of this shenanigans, and you're not getting any of the benefit, and it's really part of your legacy. I mean, these are questions that in a free society, there should be no question about this kind of disclosure. But they always play this game as far as need to know, or worried about paternalistic. And granted, I don't even care if everyone flips out and jumps off, like lemmings off the side of a cliff. If they, come out and they show pictures of, Ike, playing cards with the Grays, at Edwards Air Force Base. It's still, I mean, that's not the point. The point is that this deception that goes continually on. And really what it is, and this is the irony is, like, for instance, there's been over, I don't know, I guess estimated over $2 trillion worth of wealth that was wiped out last week. And, and that's real, savings and all that stuff. And so, what's scary about it is that within, if they kept on doing it at the rate of 4 or 5%, eventually there will be no value in the market. And what they'll end up saying is, I'm sorry. But I keep going back to even the last Great Depression. People say, oh, yes, everything's great. Well, they shuffle all this stuff on a balance sheet on the Federal Reserve. It's still there. Nothing's changed. The only thing that's changed is perception. And everyone's, well, yeah, this is what you do. You give your money to a 401k again. And it's like, it's this deception is extraordinary, and it's on every single level, that we're at. And I, for instance, we're conditioned, there was, Trump got $1 trillion, there's an additional $1 trillion deficit, as far as that. I mean, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what is $20 trillion, as far as that's what happens? Everything becomes meaningless. and this dumbing down, or this it's almost this propaganda that literally has, affected Nazi Germany, like you said, like Russia and what have you. And I think that that there's a real battlefield, going on for that, where basically people are just not, they're just going to roll over, or they're rolling over, or they're materialized, and so, and not to get too, moralistic as far as that stuff goes, but I think that, that this is probably, UFO disclosure is probably, the beginning, because I think that's where we should start, versus, all the other nonsense that are mere distractions, in our lives, because, because I think that if everyone has a higher level of consciousness, then perhaps, and there's enough of us, then perhaps we can actually create some sort of change. And incidentally, that's kind of what my uncle was attempting to do, and that was his mandate. And he was a mover and shaker. And he put together a lot of people, and he became a real force to be reckoned with. And when you talk about, death, when he died, he wasn't a young guy, but he was in good health, and he was actually had a mysterious death himself. He died of a heart attack with no symptoms of any problems with his heart. And he ended up in a place about 60 miles away from the desert, and he ended up dead. And then a lot of the research he had was stolen.
Yeah.
Days after. So. Yeah.
So, I just think that's what, again, it's been a lot of people this has happened to. I mean, back a couple years ago, there was following the news. And then when I went back and traced it, there was a lot of people who worked in, government funded labs, scientists, and people, it just, as soon as they said something, they ended up with a heart attack. And it wasn't a case of one or two. It was a lot of them. And it seemed like anytime, they kind of disagreed what was going on, something happened.
It's funny, too, and it's, in my book, and I followed as far as, how, in fact, the government, creates changes. Now, incidentally, I mean, a lot of the free thinkers and people that had come, and of course you're of this era of I am too. Kennedy, he was a real interesting guy. Of course, he was but he was extremely interested in the whole space. He wanted to do joint space research with the Soviet Union. It was a month. He actually made a speech a month before, and of course, everyone was absolutely, along with a whole bunch of different things that he had come up to, and also wanting to get rid of the Federal Reserve. And these are speeches you can go on YouTube and listen to. You can listen to his speeches on YouTube about both the Federal Reserve and the joint space, which actually were very close together. And then